corporate speak, buzzwords, jargon. The English-speaking business world is littered with phrasal verbs, idiomatic expressions, and smart-sounding phrases that sound like a completely different language, not the English that you've learned. For example, let's touch base tomorrow, or let's circle back on that tomorrow. If you've ever been in a business meeting and left thinking, I have no idea what anyone said in that meeting, then you've likely experienced a conversation full of invented terms and industry-specific jargon. English business jargon is words and phrases that employees use to share information, express ideas, give details, and so on. What's frustrating about jargon is it's often unnecessary. Business jargon might sound smart and creative, but it can often be replaced by language that is simpler and more concise. In today's Confident English lesson, you're going to learn 21 business jargon examples in English. I want you to know the most common examples of current buzzwords so you understand the conversations happening around you at work. And in this lesson today, I'll be answering the question, should you also be using this English business jargon when you speak? Let me quickly introduce myself just in case this is your first time here. I'm Anne-Marie with Speak Confident English. Everything I do here is designed to help you get the confidence you want for your life and work in English. One way I do that is with my weekly Confident English lessons, where I share my top fluency and confidence building strategies, targeted grammar, and advanced level vocabulary, just like in this lesson today. So while you're here, make sure you give this lesson a thumbs up and subscribe to my Speak Confident English channel on YouTube so you never miss one of my lessons. Also, today I have to give a shout out to one of my students, Luis, who inspired this lesson. He's been working in the corporate world in Canada for years now, and he's been keeping a steady list of common buzzwords and business jargon that he hears along the way. So Luis, thank you so much for inspiring this lesson today. Now, with these 21 examples of English business jargon that I'm going to share with you today, I've organized them into categories based on the purpose of that particular word or phrase. And along the way, I'll translate what the jargon really means with clear, accurate word choices. Now, category number one, or purpose number one for a series of corporate speak is to buy yourself some time. Sometimes we don't immediately have our thoughts organized enough to express them aloud. We need a little bit of time to contemplate, put our ideas together before we speak, and that's where buying yourself some time can be particularly useful. Some common examples of business jargon that you're likely to hear when someone is buying herself some time include, I'm just trying to think through this. Could you give me a moment? To think through something translates into the reality that you're still evaluating or problem solving. You're not ready to express your thoughts aloud. A second common example for buying yourself some time that's particularly current is let me circle back with, or let me circle back on this later. In other words, let me come back to you and talk about this at a later date. And lastly, I'm still wrapping my head around this. What that translates to is I'm still processing, or I'm still trying to understand this particular situation, or I'm still trying to understand what was said. Now, before we get into category number two, let's look at a quick common scenario where you might use one of these expressions. Let's say you're in a meeting and a team member proposes a different approach to your marketing strategy. You might need some time to evaluate that idea and you're not prepared to share your thoughts. At that moment, you could say, that's a good idea. I'm just trying to think through how we might implement it. And now our next set of English business jargon relate to the purpose of strengthening communication. As you know, when working with a team, clear lines of communication are essential for efficiency and great performance. And in every business meeting, there are multiple instances in which you may need to provide clarification or delegate particular tasks. To do that, here are some common examples of jargon you're likely to hear. I wanted to clear this with you first. What that translates into is, I need your approval, or I need some feedback from you. Another example is, please keep me in the loop on this. What that means is keep me informed or keep me up to date. And a third example you're likely to hear is, I need to bring you up to speed with, and what that means is, I need to update you. I need to provide some specific details to provide you with a thorough update. Once again, let's imagine a scenario where you might use one of these examples of jargon. Let's say a team member has been away on vacation and missed some important changes that were implemented. When that team member returns, you might say, I know a lot has changed, but don't worry, I'm going to bring you up to speed on everything. The third purpose that we're going to look at today for using business jargon is to express caution or to warn others of something. From time to time in a business meeting, there are topics of conversation that come up where warning signs start to go off. And when that happens, you might hear a team member or your boss say, be careful with that one. It can open up a can of worms. In other words, be careful with that topic, or be careful with that strategy, be careful with that idea. It could lead to a troublesome or complex situation. Another expression you might hear is just to be on the safe side. What that translates into is to take precaution or to be prepared. Our third example in this category is there's a caveat to that. What this means is there's a limiting factor or some kind of warning that we need to consider. And lastly, let's not put all our eggs in one basket. This idiomatic expression means that we should avoid putting all of our energy or resources into just one thing. Let's take a look at how we might use the third example using the word caveat in a common scenario. Perhaps your boss heard from a potential client, and that client has decided to entrust your team with a project. However, there's a condition. In sharing this news with the team, your boss might say, we got the project, but there's one caveat. We have to have it finished by the end of the week. Our fourth purpose for using corporate speak is to brainstorm with your team. Meetings, of course, are a great time for brainstorming because everyone is present, everyone has a different perspective and different ideas to bring to the table. Plus, one idea can spark another idea. During this creative process, you might encourage others to share their thoughts. You might put something on the back burner or even pitch your own ideas. While all of this happens, here are some examples of corporate speak you're likely to hear. Do you want to take a stab at it? In other words, do you want to give it a try? We'll need to flesh this out a little bit more. To flesh something out means that you need to add more substance. You need to provide something more concrete or provide more clarity. A third example of business jargon that you're likely to hear is, let's keep that in our back pocket. Or keep that in your back pocket. What that really means is to keep that thought, that idea, available for a later time when it's more necessary or when it's appropriate. Now, sometimes in a brainstorming conversation, you'll hear someone introduce an idea by saying, it's a long shot, but. And what that means is the idea they're about to propose is far-fetched or unlikely. And although it's unlikely, it may spark an idea. And when that idea happens, you might express it by saying, this is just off the top of my head, but when you start something with, this is just off the top of my head, what you're really saying is, these are my immediate thoughts or reactions. I haven't fully fleshed them out. I haven't put a lot of concrete thought to them. but they're worth sharing anyway. And now category number 5 for our 21 examples of business jargon in English is to guide and encourage your team. Perhaps everyone's been working particularly hard recently and you know they need a bit of encouragement. When you're ready to encourage your team, you might say something like, bring your A game. To bring your A game means to perform at your best or to do your best. A second expression you're likely to hear when a team needs encouragement is, we've gotten this far, let's see it through. In other words, let's continue until this is done, even though it's difficult. And finally, let's stop wasting time and get the ball rolling. To get the ball rolling translates into, let's begin, let's get something started. And now our 6th purpose for using corporate speak or buzzwords is to express momentum and stability. All businesses have their ups and downs. There are times when progress moves forward just as you predicted, and there are times when things are slower than anticipated. When describing the momentum or the stability of something, here are some examples of jargon you're likely to hear. We're gaining ground in, or we're losing ground in. For example, we're gaining ground in the market. To gain ground or to lose ground means to advance or to backtrack, to go backwards. So if you're gaining ground in the market, you're advancing, you're taking up a larger market share. And of course, if you're losing ground, the opposite is happening. The second example you're likely to hear for this purpose is it's time to get back into the swing of things. What this means is it's time to return to your usual routine. And lastly, similar to gaining or losing ground, is to gain or lose steam. Sometimes you'll also hear the word momentum, to gain momentum or lose momentum. What this translates into is to move forward faster or to go slower. Let's take a look at how we might use one of these examples in a common scenario. Perhaps your team has done a great job promoting the launch of an upcoming product. In talking about that promotion, the marketing manager might say, we've gained some ground with a younger demographic. Let's do some brainstorming around social media strategies so we don't lose that momentum. Now that we have these 21 examples of business English jargon, let's talk about whether or not you should be using this language in your English conversations. At the start of this lesson, I highlighted that corporate speak can often be replaced by simpler, more concise word choices. And in my lessons on leadership communication, I've stated that leaders use accurate, clear language. When it comes to using jargon, the truth is many people use it to hide the fact that they don't really know what to say. They haven't clarified their thoughts, so they use something that sounds smart and creative. And the reason people use jargon is everyone else seems to be using it. Jargon is used because it's popular, and in some instances, it almost becomes its own slang. When you're communicating with others, if you can choose words that are clear, simple, and accurate, you will be a better communicator. So whether or not you should use English business jargon in your conversations is entirely up to you. It can be fun to sprinkle in these buzzwords from time to time. More importantly, I want you to understand them. I want you to go into business meetings and have conversations with team members without fear. I want you to understand what is being said. Now, before we finish today, I want to ask you a question. I mentioned earlier that my student Luis has been keeping a list of examples that he hears in business meetings regularly. And I'd love to know if there are examples of buzzwords, corporate speak, business jargon that you've heard before and you're still not really sure what it means. If so, share it with me below in the comments. I'd love to take a look at those examples and make sure that you understand them. Or perhaps you have an expression that you really love using. If so, again, share it in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining me this week. If you found this lesson helpful to you, I would love to know. You can tell me in one very simple way. give this lesson a thumbs up here on YouTube. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss one of my Confident English lessons. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.